have to edit the crap out of my videos. Ooh, third gear's a little tricky.
Uh-oh.
Alright folks, welcome back to a continuing adventure in the garage. In this video I'm going to be wrapping up the power steering on the International Scout and going through the process of that with you all. I wanted to show you something that I'm about to do. So I have some rust in these splines of my pitman arm, so I went ahead, cleaned off all the gunk and everything on it, which you guys will probably have too. Clean it off in the parts washer. You can just use brake clean and a scrub brush if you don't have the parts washer. And what I'm gonna do, like I was preaching in the last video, is soak this thing in white vinegar. Brought to you by Heinz, not a sponsor. Why do I use white vinegar or not specialty stuff? Well, I can just run down to the store and get that for $5 and for a gallon. And it just takes time. So I'll let this sit overnight. Let's see how it does in the morning. All right, so I got a little progress update. I know it's hard to tell, but this is the bracket I ended up using. I got it off of Amazon. And I was able to feed it through this extra slot in the water pump. I used a magnet to hold the nut in place while I threaded it through. And I used a spacer that came with this bracket, but to keep it lined up on this plane right here, nice and even, otherwise it would have been all cattywampus. And then the size belt I ended up using was a 36-inch by 3/8 V-belt, and that just worked out quite lovely. All in all, I think it looks pretty clean, and the pump that I got comes with this chrome cap that you can put over the power steering cap. I don't know about you guys, but after my first build, I got really burnt out on chrome. Really not a fan of it. I think it just looks kind of tacky. So I'll let the customer decide whether or not they want to keep that on there. If they think it's cool, it's their truck, they can do whatever they want. Got that, and then let's check on how our pitman arm is doing. It's been not quite 24 hours. You can see it bubbling, so it's definitely chooching. It's, I don't know, I feel like I want to give it another day to get this thing really clean so it'll fit on to its new power steering gear nicely. And because I kind of would like to paint it too to help keep it lasting a really long time. But yeah, that's where we're at so far. So we just got to put the pitman arm back on, and then we'll start the bleeding process. So I'll just explain for power steering pump bleeding or burping. What we're gonna do is we're gonna fill this reservoir full of the correct power steering fluid. Now what that is, I honestly have no clue, since the pump is gonna call for one type of fluid and the steering gear is gonna want a different type. But basically, I'm just gonna find some type of old transmission fluid, probably I'll just put in there. I'll see what Scout wants in their power steering gearbox. I think that's what I'll end up putting in there. But I don't know, it might make the pump not happy. We'll just go off of sound and feel. We'll put, we'll pick a fluid, go through the procedure, and then if it's whiny or mad at us, we'll drain the fluid and replace it with something else. That's kind of the hard part about dealing with the Franken truck is, on one half we have Chevy and the other half we have Scout. But basically the process is gonna be filling this reservoir basically to the top. And then I'm gonna bump or turn over the engine for just a couple seconds. And this fluid's gonna get sucked down. You're gonna see it's gonna, and then we'll fill it up again. We'll turn it over, go through that process a few times until we don't see a drastic drop in fluid. Then we'll actually run the engine. While the engine's running, it might drop a little bit. We'll keep it topped off. And we'll just let it idle for a minute or two. And then we'll turn the wheels lock to lock all while keeping an eye on the fluid, and it'll sound noisy at first. And that's because there's going to be air still trapped in the system. And the idea of burping or bleeding the system is get all that air out. And as that air comes out of the system, it'll start to quiet down. And so we'll do it lock to lock probably 5 or 6 times. And by then, all the air should be out and we should have no noise. And then we can take her out for a test drive. But I'll actually show that process. But I wanted to explain it first so that you guys knew what was going on as it was happening. Okay, let's check out this little guy. She's been in vinegar for about 40 hours. So that rust looks like it's coming right up. You can see a bunch of gunk there. Let's put it in the parts cleaner and see how it turned out. All right, folks, so unfortunately, I spent all that time getting this thing cleaned up. But this pitman arm off the manual steering gearbox, the receiver for the output shaft is too small. This is coming in at about 26.5 millimeters, where the output shaft on the power steering gearbox at the beginning of the taper is coming in at 30. So I had to special order a power steering version. From a manufacturing standpoint, that does not make any sense to me. But there you go. If you're working on this project, keep that in mind.
Okay. Yeah, I always have to edit the crap out of my videos. Ooh, third gear's a little tricky.
Uh-oh.
So I finished the power steering on the Scout, and we're out for a test drive. The one thing that I really noticed is the steering feels pretty loose, like it's not very responsive, and that's because in your steering system you have your tie rods, your drag link, and your ball joints, and they're all 50 years old in this thing. So that'll probably be the next thing I recommend to this client, is that. And then after that, I would probably recommend a rewire and doing all the fuel lines and vacuum hoses because they're all dry rotted. But converting this thing to power steering has made it so much more of an enjoyable truck. It's so fun. Alright folks, so sorry I didn't show the actual burping process of the power steering. I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there on it, but when I was trying to do it, first I was like trying to get the Scout started, then a bunch of exhaust got in the garage, so it's kind of hectic. I didn't really have a chance to film it. But during the burping process, that pump did not make any noise. I looked up what power steering fluid International Scout uses, and they recommended GM. So that was cool because I could use GM fluid for the power steering gearbox and the pump. They're both happy with that fluid. So really cool. I didn't get any noise, like I said, when going to lock. So the pump and the gearbox were super happy working together. I did have to separately order a power steering specific pitman arm. And I got the gearbox and pitman arm through scoutparts.com, talked to their sales team. There was some measurements that I had to take to make sure I got the right box. And I did have to put down a hefty core deposit. It was like $300, and it took months since I wasn't getting one rebuilt that I could just send to them to rebuild. They were waiting for one to come in. But eventually got it in so I could get it in the Scout. So if you have a Franken truck, you know, you can totally do this. The power steering gearbox is a little pricey, but it's just a world of difference driving that truck with power steering now. It's so much fun to drive. Before it was so scary because it was like, just really hurt the shoulders to turn that thing, and the client's a little bit older. So I wanted it nice and easy for him to drive. And now it makes test driving a lot more fun. So it's going to a body shop next, and I probably won't see it for quite a while until the client wants to stiffen up the steering and do rewiring. I'm not sure what else we'll do to it. Third gear in that manual transmission does not seem to be synchronizing properly. So he might have me look into that. That whole drivetrain is a Chevy drivetrain, so it should be easy to get parts and information for that stuff. I don't typically work on classics, but I learned on classics. I cut my teeth on a 69 Chevy C10 and rewired it, converted all disc brakes, did a fuel injection system in it, put a motor in it. I think the only thing with that truck that I really wish I had done, put a transmission in it that had overdrive. It only had a turbo 350, so I couldn't take it on faster roads, which I guess I probably shouldn't have anyways, because that thing's so unsafe. But if you are doing projects like this, so like with that Scout, I started with the brake system. I redid the brake system completely. And especially those rubber sections of brake line, those are always on their way out. So I would change those out, change out your wheel cylinders, possibly your calipers, master cylinder, get your brake system really fresh and healthy first before you start moving on to these other projects. Because safety, right? These old classics are already so unsafe the way they are. They're really a death trap. So make sure you get your brake system handled first, and then worry about what kind of motor do I want to throw it, or what kind of transmission, or how else do I want to customize it. Get it safe first. Make sure it has adequate braking power. Like an example on my 69, the reason why I converted to all disc was it had all drum. And the brakes went out on me one time when I was driving through some hills, and it scared the crap out of me, like it should anybody when your brakes go out. So I wasn't messing around after that. I put in all disc. So consider looking into disc conversions. This Scout has drum in the back and disc up front, and it feels adequate. I was able to get the e-brake working again, so now it's self-adjusting, so the back brakes are actually contributing as much as the fronts are. So the brake system feels great. I would also consider replacing your proportioning valve while you're doing the brake system. I should have done it on the Scout, but there are seals within your proportioning valve, and it's important to remember anything rubber or plastic on an old car is going to degrade over time, and if those seals are 50 years old, sitting in dirty brake fluid, they're probably not very healthy. So I would always start with brakes. I know everybody wants to start with the motor and all that stuff, but that's the way I would go about it if you're looking for some advice on where to get started on a project car. So we handled the brake system first, then I handled the battery situation. It sits a lot, so there's a disconnect for the battery. And then, okay, now what do we want to focus on? Okay, client's next priority was power steering, so that's what we do. Now the steering feels loose, so let's tighten that up. And then eventually let's rewire it so that we know our tail and headlights and everything like that are in healthy condition. That's another adventure in the garage. Thanks for hanging along. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.